Hi, Peter, the Roman American, coming to you from somewhere in Newark, New Jersey. Still feeling my way around this video blogging thing. I think it's coming along. Getting a handle on how much information YouTube will allow to be uploaded at one time, and now I think my standard runtime for 720 HD is 15 minutes. So I'll be mindful of the clock, and I may have to go into two parts. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna think this is gonna be a two-parter. So we'll call this the history of human spiritual evolution development, part one. Now, a lot of Bible book believers will tell you that they have full faith and confidence in the biblical account of creation. When they tell you that, you can feel free to suspect that they have not read the Bible, because if they did, and if you do, if you pick up any standard Bible right now, you'll see there are two separate and distinct creation stories. One is found in Genesis chapter 1, and then the second is found in Genesis chapter 2. And they are different, substantially different, in that in chapter 1 it talks about how Adam was created out of mud, and Eve was pulled from his rib. And in Genesis 2, you will read that both Adam and Eve were created separate and distinct beings. No mud is mentioned. So you go ahead and you look and you'll see. But be that as it may, the point, if the idea that those two chapters are trying to convey is that human life did not spontaneously create or evolve out of other forms of life, then with that idea, I am in full agreement. Absolutely. I used to be Catholic, and in my grammar school days, I recall being instructed that the reason why God, Yahweh, Papa Yahweh actually, created humankind was that he had his angels and he had his other creations. And his angels loved them, absolutely, even the ones that rebelled against him. But they loved them because they knew him and they seen him and they knew he was there. What Yahweh wanted, what Papa Yahweh wanted, was to create beings that would come to love him for the wonderful, wonderful Father that he is, without really knowing that he's there. Like the best friend we ever had, without knowing he was there. Okay, so to that end, the Garden of Eden was created. And into the Garden of Eden was created and put the beginning of, I guess it's fair to say, the beginning of the Jewish people, because that, for all intent and purposes, is where the Jewish line began. Now, there are some Jewish writings that say that before Eve there was another wife for Adam, and her name was Lilith, but we won't get into that because that's a tangent. And the problem with following the Bible for your spiritual information is that there's so many branches and vines that it's easy to get lost, and it's easy to get lost. So, as the wonderful Garden of Eden was brought into creation, and Adam and Eve put into it, the rest of the world existed. There were human beings existing, as you will see if you read the creation story. After Adam and Eve gets thrown out of the garden, they find themselves interacting with those other people. So there was, human life had unfolded already in many ways, and many civilizations have risen up. But Adam and Eve were placed in the garden, and they were given perfection and a want for nothing, and instructed to avoid the fruit of one tree. Papa Yahweh instructed them, everything is yours. Watch out don't eat from this tree. Now, the language here is interesting. He said, because on the day that you eat from the fruit of this tree, you will know death. And he gave that instruction to Adam. That's another interesting sidebar. He didn't give it to Adam and Eve together. He gave it to Adam. Adam told Eve later on, according to one of those two accounts, found in chapter 1 of Genesis or chapter 2. Be that as it may. As fate would have it, the enemy to humankind. Let me backtrack a little bit. When the idea of creating this humankind, was presented to the angelic community, one of the mighty angels rebelled. And the legend is that did not like the idea of having to bow to a lesser species, us, biological based, carbon based, and said that he wouldn't do it. He said he would not give honor and worship or respect to being less than his status. So as a result of his rebellion, he got thrown out. Him and 1/3 of the angels on hand followed him, got thrown out. Little Michael grabbed them by the scruff of their halos and wings, and so they went and they inhabited another realm of existence that we know as hell. Anyway, so this spiritual entity presented itself in the form of a serpent to Eve, and started to talk to Eve, who was for some reason by herself, as her husband was out naming the animals or something. Don't think he went to a gay bar. Don't think there were any gay bars in those days. But wait, I'm getting sidetracked. So the Lucifer snake says, Eve, the reason why Yahweh does not want you to eat from that tree is because when you do, you're going to be smart like him. You're going to know everything that he knows. You don't want that. So Eve, who was blonde, let's just call a spade, said, "Oh, really? Well, I want knowledge. I was just born yesterday, pretty much, kind of airy in the head, and I would like knowledge, so yeah, let's bring it on." So she ate the fruit, and nothing happened. Nothing terrible happened. And she, like any good wife, introduced the delicious fruit, the enlightening fruit, to her husband. And he said, no, you're not supposed to. Remember what he said, no, don't do it. He said, no, I did it. It's okay. And the snake told me it was okay. So he said, well, okay, if you did it and the snake said it was okay, then it must be okay. Let me have it. And then they did. Then he did, and then they did. The next time that Yahweh came to town, things had changed. They were hiding. Now, there was a good rapport, a nice, friendly relationship that occurred between Yahweh and Adam and Eve up until that time. Running around bare ass and what have you, and everything was wonderful. But following the events of the fruit-eating episode, they got a self-awareness of their nakedness, so the legend says, and they hid when they heard him coming. And when he showed up, he found them hiding in the bushes. And I said, "Hey, what's going on, Adam? What's going on?" He said, "No, listen, we're hiding because we're naked." And he said, "Oh, what'd you learn about this naked stuff?" I know what happened. We ate the fruit. He said, now this is where it gets interesting, and this is important stuff, I think. Because if it would have went any other way, I think that the crucifixion of 2012 years ago need not have happened. Adam and Eve were presented with a situation. They were guilty. Each of them were guilty in doing what they freely willed to do. They ate the fruit that they were instructed not to do. But what did they do? Did they own up to their guilt, to their own responsibility? No. Did they show concern and protection and love for one another, which is, remember, this is what Yahweh wanted. He wanted loving beings to love him, to love one another, to love, to be kind and to be generous, to be helpful, to avoid hurtfulness. This is what he wanted. So what did he get? He got Adam saying it was all her fault. He got her saying it was all the snake's fault. They got everybody blaming each other, and nobody's accepting responsibility, and nobody is saying, it was my fault. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. My fault. Sorry. Because I assure you, if it turned out that way, if they would have done that, if they would have come close to doing that, then I believe our Father Yahweh would have been very pleased with their spiritual progression. He knew that they were going to eat the fruit already. If you notice the language, on the day that you eat of that fruit, it's going to be bad. But anyway, they didn't, and so they were cast out of the Garden of Perfection, and angels were put at the gate so they couldn't come back in. And then they dwelled with the pagans of the world, with the people following these strange gods. That a few thousand years later, Moses would hand the people a covenant, a new covenant from Abraham's covenant, and he would free the people from Egypt, and he would establish a new Jewish community, a New Age Jewish community, and that would all happen 3,000 or 4,000 years later. But until then, a lot of suffering happened. There was the Babylonian captivity. The Jews were taken in prisoner and made slaves of Babylon. That's where they say the languages, the division in language came from. And subsequently, there was the Egyptian captivity and the Roman subjugation. And if you look at each of those enslavements, and even go in history, forward in history, and look at what happened in Nazi Germany, you will see that there were members of that community that sold their people out. Just like there were members of the Sanhedrin that sold out Yahweh's own son. To keep their system going, they had the Messiah executed. So it's not an unusual story. A lot of people, for good cause, Jewish people get defensive and they say, "Oh, you're picking on Jews," and that's a wrong thing to do, because in the great scheme of things, there are more good Jews, more decent, loving, caring human beings that are of Jewish descent and heritage than there are stinker Jews. But you cannot forget that there are stinker Jews. There are massive stinker Jews, perfectly, only few, but those few stink on ice. And it's unfortunate that they're allowed to continue to be called Jews. It's sad. I would, if I was a member of that community, I would say, you are not Jewish, get out. But I'm not, so I can't. Anyway, I'm running down on time. I can see by the clock, so let me just say I'll carry on with part 2 and part 3 at another sitting. Peaceful day.